Good afternoon, everyone. As we continue with our professional development series for our teacher aides and monitors across the district. Hello, welcome back. Today should be a familiar face for you with regard to our presenter. We are going to hear from the chair for pre-K to primary, the chair for special education, that is Mrs. Gina Callesano from the district. So you should be familiar with Ms. Callesano today, and she's bringing a topic of supporting students with difficult and challenging behaviors, and really will run the gamut of students with disabilities and our non-classified students as well. So I'm sure you will find some usefulness to what Ms. Callesano is going to present today, one way or another, and that is really our goal with the professional development sessions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Gina Callesano.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Hi everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to sign up for this topic. It is a topic that I am passionate about. For those of you who don't know me, before I became a chair here in Farmingdale, I was a classroom teacher for 18 years. I worked in a variety of settings with students who had various disabilities and many challenging behaviors, which is really where my passion comes from. I've worked with many professionals, many aides and monitors, all of which have been the backbone of my classroom and now our teams. And when I was going through, I had asked Ro, oh, she left. I had asked Ro if she could give me a list of participants, just so that I knew, who I would be familiar with, what roles you had here in the district. I was impressed first by the number, and I was grateful because I felt like this is really something that applies to you every day, and I hope that today you will take something back to your classroom, to your homes, to the children that you work with, and it will benefit you. If at any point in time you need to stop me, you want to slow me down, ask any questions, share a personal story, don't hesitate to do that. I did that already. Okay, I put this quote up here just because I truly believe that the classrooms that you work in and the teams that you work on, it's a matter of collaboration all day, every day, and you're a family, and everybody needs to be on board, sharing a philosophy, and having transparency, right, with what's going on with our kids, because they are our kids. So teamwork is really at the heart of all of our work.
Please excuse this interruption of your learning time. 6th and 7th grade students are reminded to please bring their charged Chromebooks with them for tomorrow's iReady. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your patience. We had a little announcement, and I just want to make sure that you're getting all of the information in real time here. Confidentiality. When we talk about our kids and we talk about their behaviors, something that's always a priority is confidentiality. Please, I just ask, always, that you think about them as if they were your own child. And if something were happening to your child in school, in terms of behavior, would you want it shared out in the supermarket, in a restaurant, socially on the field? Definitely not. And I know that when working with kids, things can get heated and things are trying, and you go home and you share with your families the stories that went on in your day. Just try to be mindful that confidentiality is an issue. Leave the names out and maybe just share the story of something that's funny that may have happened. But this I say first because it is our highest priority, that this is somebody's child. Sometimes people may ask you questions about the kids that you work with. it might be obvious that this is a child who has patterns of challenging behaviors. You can answer them, but keep it, again, value the child's privacy, and that there are things going on that you're privy to just by being part of the classroom team that not everybody needs to know. Positive behavior supports, also known as PBS. You may hear this thrown around as a buzzword. What is it? I'm going to just read this for you in case you can't see it. According to the Association of Positive Behavior Supports, PBS is a set of research-based strategies used to increase quality of life and decrease problem behavior by teaching new skills and making changes in a person's environment. So the two things that are most important to know about positive behavior supports are, first, the environment, and second, replacement behavior. So if something's happening and there's a pattern of behavior, it's important to look around and see what's going on in the environment that might be triggering this student, right? Is it a cafeteria that's just too noisy or overstimulating? Is there a child in there that they don't get along with? It's important to mention, and I think Dr. Thompson touched on it when he started, this presentation is going to be geared for many different roles across the district. So while some of you may be working with students who have disabilities, such as autism, where the behavior is significant and it's easy to see, it's visible, and you can pretty much identify why a child is engaging in some type of negative behavior. Maybe they don't like the sounds or the commotion of the cafeteria. Some of you are also working with students who are not classified students and don't have a disability at all. And maybe there are other things that set them off, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but just noteworthy when we're looking at an environment. Who are we looking at? We're looking at the child first. Are we looking at a classified child? Are we looking at a non-classified child? Are we looking at a child who may have experienced trauma? Are we looking at a child who maybe has something going on at home that we don't know about? So I think when we look at our kids and we try to quickly in the moment, because these behaviors come up quick, whether it's a child engaging in a behavior because they have autism and they are frustrated and you can pinpoint why, or it's a student who just had a hard morning at home with his family and now is getting into a fight. It's coming up quick. So you're going to look and you're going to assess who is the child and what could the reason be. Sometimes you may not be able to figure it out in the moment, but the information that you collect afterward might be valuable going forward. These are just a couple of examples of positive behavior supports and looking at an environment. When an adult's attention is withdrawn or focused on other children, when an adult's attention is withdrawn or focused on other children, Lisa makes noises. Her behavior results in the adult talking to her and moving closer to her. Tell Lisa when you will be unavailable for extended periods. I'm going to be with Johnny right now. Interact with Lisa periodically from across the room. So this is just an example of the adults who are working with Lisa looking at the environment. They know that when she's making noises, instead of just saying like, Lisa, stop, why are you making this noise? It's distracting to others. They took notice of what's happening in the environment. It's when the teacher is talking to other kids. So they address that. So that's one example. The second example, when unanticipated changes in the routine occur, and I think we all know who these students are, that they are so set on their routines and their structures, and something has to change in the schedule, they're disrupted and behavior occurs. Ben throws his materials, having to pick them up, delays the transition to the next activity. Provide a written picture schedule and refer to it throughout the day. Prepare Ben for changes by saying, next we will. Remove materials prior to transition. So these are some things that this teacher did to prepare the student for change or transition. So knowing your students, knowing what the triggers are, can help you to manipulate the environment and the things that are going on around the student to prevent them from occurring. This third example takes a look at, it gives us an example, and then it talks about how the environment was manipulated and a replacement behavior was given. When Donna finishes an activity early, she bites her fingernails and cuticles. This gives her another form of stimulation. Provide Donna with something she enjoys doing when she finishes the activities early. Any kind of handheld game, fidget, something like that. So rather than just telling the student, stop, 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 she's given something to use in her hands. And many of you may see students who are walking around with squish balls or fidgets or spinners or sometimes those tubes. All of those items are serving a function or a purpose for the student. The idea is to replace a behavior that's not functional. Okay, so there are many reasons for behavior, and I think the most important thing here is to note that there are reasons for behavior. At no time does a behavior occur without some type of reason or event that set it off. And you may hear somebody say, if you ask, well, what happened? You know, the kid got up, he was eating lunch, and now the table's over there, and everybody's shuffling around. I'm like, what happened? And often you'll hear the people around him say, nothing happened. No, nothing. Something happened. It could have been something that he was thinking about. It could have been something that he overheard somebody say that set him off. It could have been somebody entering the room that he knows that there might be some type of friction toward or had some kind of reaction to the day before. Something happened. I think the science, I'll say, because there's no magic in this, the science in trying to reduce, extinguish, and replace behaviors is finding out and identifying what it was. And sometimes it's really hard. And it takes a lot of people, like people who know the student, to really talk things through. So talk to your team, talk to the teachers that you work with, talk to the people that spend time with him. If you know that he's outside of school, like try to get some information about him or her. Reasons behavior might occur. Disabilities, that certainly, students with disabilities do often engage in non-preferred behaviors. There are 13 disability categories. I highlighted the ones where we see the behaviors most often. So other health impaired, that includes our students with ADHD. Oftentimes they're impulsive, right? They have this, and it's part of their disability. They have executive functioning issues, which means that they have difficulty preparing, planning, organizing, transitioning, things like that, that may feel really overwhelming to them. This ADHD and other health impaired is what I call the invisible disability. It's the one where we look at students and we just can't see what the issue is, but it's there and we overlook it and we almost fault them, right? It's not a student in a wheelchair, a student who's blind, a student with autism, where we can easily take a look at them and say, oh, they have a disability. We can support them in this way. This is one of our invisible disabilities, and really something to keep in mind. And I think this is also when we see students who struggle socially, they also fall into this disability category, right? They don't have the social judgment, they can't read social cues on other people's faces. They struggle with all of these things, but it's not something that they're wearing a sign saying. So other kids just shy away from them, or they end up in a situation where they're fighting or bullying is occurring. Autism, emotional disturbance, that's also a category where we would see high levels of behavior. Intellectual disability, the intellectual disability, that's formally was referred to as mental retardation. So we're looking at a population of students who cognitively are functioning at a very low level and can become frustrated, similar to the kids who are on the autism spectrum. So you may see some of those stereotypical behaviors there. Multiple disabilities, so that would be a child who has more than one, and traumatic brain injury. Again, these disabilities here are really more cognitive impairments, so the lens you would be looking through would be frustration. Okay, typically their communication skills are not what they need to be to express their wants and needs, or that they may need a break, or different from our other health impaired kids, right, who are impulsive and they have difficult time making a decision or problem solving and executing it the right way. So disability could account for behavior. The invisible backpack, which we talked a little bit about, the things that happen outside of us that kids are carrying around, the trauma, you know, change in their home situation, things that they're just not coming to school and laying out on the table when they get there to tell their friends and their teachers that are happening at home, but the reality is they're happening, and it could affect their behavior because now it's stressful for them, and they have to figure out a way to come to school ready to learn, and yet they have all of this weighing on them. So if we think about it from our perspective, right, you have an argument with your spouse, or your kid's getting out the door in the morning, it's stressful, and you have to come here and you have to be ready to work and smile. And that's hard, and we're adults. So for them, that's what I call the invisible backpack. Mental health. We're seeing a lot of this. Mental health, we're seeing a lot of mental health challenges in our kids, so that certainly contributes to their behavior. Fighting, poor decision making, impulsivity, they're getting involved in activities that we just, you know, poor choices. And trauma, of course, anyone who's gone through any type of trauma is at risk for demonstrating significant behavior. So I ask, as we go through the presentation, that you think through these lenses.
May I have your attention, please? Today's faculty meeting will be held in the auditorium and will be starting at approximately 2:50. Thank you.
Okay, so similar to when you go to the doctor and you tell them you're not feeling well, you have a cold, you have a sore throat, your ears hurt, and they're like, oh, it's a virus, right? Like, and they tell you, go home, take Sudafed, drink a lot of water. They're treating the symptoms. They're not treating a diagnosis, right? And I use this because when you think of a child, and you think of a child who has a disability, just because they have that particular disability doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to engage in a checklist of behaviors that are associated with that disability. So when you look at their behavior, yes, it gives you a framework, but try to treat the behavior, right? So if they're screaming, you might want to walk up to them and quietly give them a nonverbal signal to, you know, quiet down, try and see what's happening, and rather than falling into that, like, oh, well, they have autism, so it must be this, you know, let's try to stay away from it must be this because they have a diagnosis, but instead look at the behavior as, you know, just one isolated behavior, because that behavior might look differently tomorrow. It doesn't necessarily mean it's because they're autistic. This is a big one. A student's behavior is never personal. It's never about me, it's never about you. I've walked into classrooms and tried to intervene with students who were throwing things, and they grabbed my hair. It wasn't about me. It could have been you. You could have walked in and they would have grabbed your hair. So please try to remember that when a student is in crisis, that they're not being disrespectful toward you. They're in crisis, and you happen to be the person that's trying to help them. If they're cursing and you walk over to them in the hallway and you say, like, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? And they turn around and they tell you, you know, where to take it. It's not about you. This is a child who's having a behavior, who's in crisis, and needs some type of support. So please, it's not you. Behavior is always serving as some type of communication, whether it be our most impaired nonverbal students or our most verbal non-classified students. They're trying to communicate something. Is it that they're angry about something and they are lashing out? Is it that they are frustrated because they can't hold a pencil and somebody's asking them to write? That they break the pencil and they throw it across the room. So beyond the behavior, there's something more that's trying to be communicated, no matter what the cognitive ability is. Okay, our nonverbal students typically use behavior more to communicate because it's the only thing that they have. They have the iPads. You may see them walking around with the iPads. They're using Proloquo. It's not the spoken language that you and I have, and oftentimes if they can't get their message across fast enough, they will resort to a behavior. And we'll talk a little bit about the functions and how to identify what might be happening, but again, it's, there's no real magic to it, and sometimes it's trial and error, and we think it's one thing, and it's completely different. So there's always work to be done. These are just some behaviors that when we see behavior, it may appear that a student is defiant or disrespectful or angry. That's what we see when we see a student engaging in some type of a behavior. But in fact, it might just be frustration, anxiety, stress. So again, try to strip away what you see or perceive to be these things here, and really take through the lens of the student. I'm going to show you a little video that I happen to really love, and I'm going to rely on Jeff here for all the people in their buildings to get the sound out there. Right? We tried to troubleshoot through this. This is a video clip of a man. He's now a man. When he was in high school, he was the leader of a gang, and how his whole life changed because of the way a teacher approached his negative behaviors.
Meet Litter Robot, the self-cleaning automatic litter box for cats. It eliminates the burden of scooping and leaves your cat with a clean bed of litter every time.
My name is DJ Baptiste, and I was born in Lacombe, Louisiana. I was raised by my grandmother. I was born to a 14-year-old mom and a 16-year-old dad, so they were young. They really weren't able to make too many decisions. I was very defiant, though. I loved to get in trouble because of getting in trouble got your attention. I was the type of student where I loved attention, and I did whatever it took to get attention. I was the leader of a gang. And let me tell you why, because in a gang, we got that sense of security and a sense of belonging. We feel like these my homies, they gonna take care of me, they got me, no matter what. So that give us that sense of belonging. Fight. That was our only option. We had a disagreement, we fought. Whether we playing basketball, playing hide and go seek, it didn't matter. If it's a disagreement, we fight. So I was raised like that, and that was instilled in my head. There wasn't no other option. You fight. You got to be violent. And I'm gonna tell you, we like to fight in school because we know we had a crowd, so we continue to get kicked out of school. We jump people. I mean, just so much violence. I never was a second thought. When it came to my head, that's what I did. If I wanted to fight, boom, I'm fighting. If you're close enough where I can put my hands on you, I'm hitting you in your mouth. That's just how I was. I did go to juvenile twice.
My name is Donna Porter, and I teach public speaking at Picayune Memorial High School in Picayune, Mississippi.
I knew. I sat back and thought about it. When you late to something, everybody looks at you.
And all of a sudden, the door flings open, and this huge student that I've never seen in my life walks in and says,
"What's up?"
I paused it because I don't know if you heard what he said. He sat back and he thought about it. And when you're late to something, everybody looks at you. So that was so strategic, and it makes me think of our kids who are attention seeking because they're needy and they're coming from homes where something's going on. Maybe their parents have to work all the time. Maybe they're tending to other kids. Whatever it is, their need for attention and support is not being filled. So they're going to get it, and they figure out negative ways to get it. And I think that's something that we talk about a lot in special education, like, oh, this child's doing X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna punish him for it. But wait, hold on. We're never teaching him what the positive is, and he's getting the negative attention anyway. So how do we frame this so that he's going to get it in a positive way? And that always stands out to me when I hear it. Like, I figured out that when I could come late to school, everybody would look at me.
And she looked, and I said, "What's up?" You know, and I just had the attention of the class that bad.
my first thought is, why did this happen to me? On the first day of school when I'm trying to set the tone. And then I thought, I've got this. Thank goodness I've got this. But to be able to access my brilliance, I have to take a deep breath, stay composed, and watch him, look at his nonverbal language, because all behavior is purposeful.
She said, well, I noticed you're late to my room. There's no problem because you probably couldn't find it. I just kind of looked at her with this crazy look like, yeah, whatever. And then she was like, well, have a seat. And I looked at her, I said, do you have any kids?
And I said, well, actually, your name is DJ, Mr. Baptiste. I have two, and I just informed the class about it, but because you missed my room, you didn't hear. So are you married, he said. And I said, actually, I just told the class I've been married for 30 years.
I stepped back and said, 30 years? Folded my arms, looked up and down and said, don't you think it's time for a change? Now, at that point in time right there, I expected her to get red in the face, lose her composure, run to her desk, get a referral, write me up, and send me out. I was ready for that. That's what I expected. And now that I've learned the brain seeks patterns. So that was the pattern that my brain was seeking. You be disrespectful, you get sent out of class, but you get the attention that you want. She didn't do that. She looked at me, she smiled, and said,
do you go to the doctor when you're well? And he looked at me very funny. He said, no, you go when you're sick. I said, do you come to school when you know everything? He said, I guess not. I guess you come supposedly to learn. I said, well, you've got a lot to learn, and I can't wait to teach you. And then I left him with that feeling of angst. And then I said, you know what I noticed more importantly about you? You have charisma.
Charisma? You know, she was like, do you know what that means? I said, I'm cute. And everybody in the class laughed. And she was like, something like that. She was like, but you just know how to work a room, you know? And I said, I was just listening to her. She was like, she threw me off because she started talking good about me after I wanted her to be kind of get into a power struggle with me. That's what I wanted.
And I said, so I've been thinking in the last few seconds, I give jobs to my students in high school. Do you know anything about jobs in school? He said, oh yeah. In kindergarten, I was the line leader. I said, we don't have a line leader in high school, but we have appropriate jobs. And I usually take a week or so to figure out what job would best fit what student. I do a multiple intelligence survey, and we tell a little bit about ourselves. But you know what, DJ? I don't need to do all that with you, because you're innately designed to be a greeter. He's like, a greeter? What's that? And I said, a greeter is someone that will stand at my door every morning.
As everybody come in, I get to shake everybody's hand, appropriately hug the girls. That threw my mind off. And then she said, on top of that, I get to come in front of her class and have my own session for 2 to 3 minutes. How does that sound? That's what she said. I said, it sounds too good to be true, so let me run it back to you. I said, so you mean to tell me I get to stand outside your classroom, shake everybody's hand who comes by, then on top of that, I get to come in front of the class and have my own session? She was like, yeah. I said, well, I want, you know what I'm saying, I want to try this. She was like, but it's one catch. And I remember I dropped my head like I knew it was something, you know.
All you have to do is be on time.
Because if you're my greeter, that means you have to be the first one here so everybody get a chance to see you and shake your hand before they walk in my classroom. And I just remember shaking my head like, all right, I try this, you know. I see what it's something here I can't tell yet, but it was something there, and I just remember thinking I tried it. And she said, okay, pick up your backpack that you threw down and go have a seat. And that was the first day of my new life.
Day 2, I'm standing in the hall and I see this mass of people just partying, and the only figurative language I can think of is Moses parting the Red Sea. And here comes this huge guy, and I hear these words that are so important for anybody watching this video. Everybody move out of my way. I've got to get to Miss Porter's class on time because, listen, I have a job to do. I have a job to do. A disconnected child is a discouraged child. He needed to be encouraged, and every day he stood from day 2. He had been in the criminal justice center. He had been expelled from the alternative school. He had been in school isolation, out of school suspension. Nothing worked. All he needed was to be encouraged. And he became my greeter. We usually have jobs just every 9 weeks, but by unanimous vote of the class, he became the year-long greeter because they felt nobody could do the job as well as DJ.
I feel like the experiences that I went through in my life was meant to happen so I can come back and help kids, help teachers understand. I feel like I have a gift that I need to share, a testimony that I would like to share, and I know I can help kids along with teachers. Oftentimes teachers get into it with students, they have problems with students because they don't have the skills. And I feel like anytime I can help a teacher get the skills,
So I love that video. It never gets old for me. And there's so much embedded in it that speaks to me. But before I go on, is there anything that anybody wants to comment on or say about what we just watched? No? Okay. So this is a good example. DJ is a great example of a child who just needed somebody to give him attention and something important to come to school for. And I think that's where we really have to look, right? We have to look at our kids, we have to know what they value, we have to know what they need, and we have to find a way to meet them where they are. And we say that a lot in special education, right? We want them to be here, but they're here. How do we get them here? Well, we meet them here, right? Find out where they are, meet them there. She developed the rapport, which is huge, and that trust, and she gave him something important and motivated him to get to school. I'm not saying that giving every child a job is going to be the be-all and end-all, but I think it's important that when we look at our kids, some of them who have the most challenging behaviors, that we look really deep and see where we can meet them and how we can support them. What can we do to offer them the supports that are going to help them, because they're going to leave us, right? And the idea isn't just to help them here while they're with us at the elementary buildings, at Howard, and at the high school, but to give them the tools to help themselves as they go back out into the world. Functions of behavior. When we look at a behavior and we think about ways to help students, we have to really figure out what the reason for the behavior is, right? And I said, do you give an ice pack to a student with a bloody nose? No, you give him a tissue, because that's what's going to solve his problem in the moment. When you look at behavior, if you're pairing a response to a behavior that's different than what a student is trying to access, it's not going to work. And here's our checklist of behaviors. It's like a mental checklist that when we look at a student, we go through. Like, are they sick? Are they hurt? Did something happen that we need to tend to medically? No. Okay. Are they looking for attention? If they're doing a lot of things to engage in negative attention, we all know who those kids are. They're making a lot of noise in class, they're cracking jokes, they're interrupting, they're being disrespectful, the other kids are laughing, it's attention seeking. How do we turn that around, like DJ's teacher did, and give them the attention they're looking for, because they're getting it in a positive way, and teach them that, responsibly you can get attention. Irresponsibly, you're gonna end up in the dean's office. For our kids who have disabilities, is it sensory seeking? Are they banging their head against the wall? Are they, I know this is gross, but are they picking their nose? Some of our younger students, right? That's all sensory. They like the way it feels. It's doing something for them that we can't see. And the way to interrupt those behaviors and interfere with them and change them is to give them something that's going to replace it. We see kids at the elementary level who are licking. They lick like everything. So we give them things to put in their mouth that's going to take that sensory away. Sometimes you see them playing with their saliva. Again, you can look at that and know that that's sensory. It's not anything that's meant to gain attention from you or I. for them, they're getting something out of it. And those are really the hardest behaviors to eliminate and replace, because how do you replace saliva rubbing against somebody's fingers? Like, you really have to be pretty creative. And I have seen some amazing people in the field come up with some really great ideas at times, but those are really the hardest to get away. And tangible. Are they looking for something tangible? Do they want a snack? Do they want a reward? Do they want computer time, their phone? What they're engaging in some type of behavior to obtain a tangible. So if that's the case, the solution or the response for that is, okay, you can have it, but you have to do, it's contingent upon X, Y, and Z. You have to finish this work. If it's a student who has a low frustration tolerance and who's struggling with the work, I would be reluctant to ask him to finish 14 math problems that are difficult before giving him access to something that's motivating to him, because he's never going to be able to do that. So what's within reason? Let's finish 5. I'll help get you started. You'll do the rest on your own, and then you'll get what it is that you're looking for, so that it's attainable, right? The child has room for success, and you can build on it. Eventually, you'll get to 14 math problems, but you're not getting to 14. You're not even getting to 1 math problem if there's a behavior that's interfering regularly, and you're not teaching him that in order to get what it is he's looking for, he's got to be appropriate to do it. Some strategies, positive behavior support strategies, just rule of thumb to keep in mind. Appropriate use of language, right? Monitor your tone. The most intense crisis calls for a neutral tone of voice, right? If you're approaching a child who's like on the floor screaming or looking through another lens, one of our non-classified kids who are fighting, and you run up and you're like, Johnny, what are you doing, Johnny? No, it's not. It's only going to make Johnny go from here to here, like neutral, and that's hard because you're stressed and you're like, oh no, and everybody's looking like, how are you going to respond to this, right? Because you're Johnny's age, so what are you going to do about Johnny right now? Neutral, calm, even. You are the person who has the relationship closest to Johnny, and even though Johnny might not look like it in the moment, he's counting on you for that calm. So, and less is more. When a child is in crisis, any child, less language, right, is more like clear, direct, what do you want them to do? If they're on the floor, stand up. If they're running, walk. Okay, and notice that the phrasing that I used was positive. It's not, don't run, stop doing, it's what do I want Johnny to do? Okay, because if I'm telling him what not to do, and he's in crisis. Johnny, stop hitting Joey. Johnny, stop hitting Joe. John, what do I want Johnny to do? That's all he hears, and he's in a place to begin with. It's, Johnny, put your hands down. We're leaving. Know the student that you're with, know their triggers. Okay, that's really important. If you know that he needs some kind of 5-minute warning that things are changing that day, or that somebody's going to be in the cafeteria that he's not familiar with or he doesn't like, you need to know those triggers, because that's going to be proactive. And we always want to be proactive and positive. Proximity. Kids feel the way we feel when we're too close to them, right? Like, we know who the close talkers are in the world. They do too. Especially when they're agitated, keep a safe distance, because although you may be their aide, you may be the person they see in the hallway and really like when they're in a good place, when they're agitated and their adrenaline is going and you're too close to them and they start to swing, you're going to get it. And that's not, so we want to be able to keep a safe distance. We want them to know we respect that you're going through something, and we're here, but we're not here right in your face. And please be mindful about talking about kids in front of kids. They're there, they hear you, even the kids who are nonverbal, even the kids who have significant intellectual impairments, they still know that we're talking about them. So after the fact, if they've had to go to a crisis area, or they've had to go with a psychologist, or anywhere, to the dean, they're still within earshot. Please don't talk about the incident. That's, again, goes back to the respect and the confidentiality. Behavior intervention plans. Many of you who work with our more impaired students may be running these in your classroom every day. These are really for our kids in our 6s and our 12s. They are designed by the school psychologist, and they are run by the classroom teacher and the aides that are working with them. In any instance of behavior support, rapport and consistency are key. That's just like a rule, behavior plan or not. Develop a rapport with the kids so that when things aren't going so well, somebody can call upon you, right? Sometimes if I walk into a situation and I don't know the student, I don't just jump right in because he doesn't know me or she doesn't know me. I kind of assess who's around. Is there someone that might be more helpful in the situation than me? Maybe I can just talk to them on the side and they can do the talking with the student, right? So develop rapport with kids when things are really good, so when they're not so good, you can be their trusted adult. And consistency, right? If you're working on a team, in a classroom, in a behavior plan, the key is consistency. Everybody's speaking the same language. If there's a token board that goes with the student, the token board goes everywhere with the student. Everyone who's working with that student is using the token board. They're speaking a common language. There's no confusion for the student that way. Stick with the plan unless the plan has been formally changed. And that's a big one, because we hear people say like, oh, I know they were supposed to be working for 10 minutes, but today they were doing a really good job, so I just cut it at 5. No, we can't change a behavior plan ever unless it is formally changed. Because the idea is if they're working for 10 minutes, we want to stretch it to 12 minutes. And then 13, so if somebody's making an executive decision to change the plan and the rest of the team is following the rule of consistency, we're confusing the student and the teaching isn't happening. So the plan goes everywhere and everyone follows the plan. That's really where we see the most effective outcomes for students. Communicate with others outside of the team to let them know that there is a plan in place. So for example, if you're walking down the hallway and you see a student just sitting on the floor and you see an adult with them, ignoring them, you can ask the adult, do you need anything? But chances are there's a plan in place and it's planned ignoring, or some other strategy that we don't know about. And if somebody comes along, for example, if the student, we're planning to ignore the student, we wait him out, right? He's gonna get up in 5 minutes, we know this about him. And then someone comes along and says like, oh, hey, Johnny, remember yesterday at the baseball field? And now Johnny's engaged and he's getting a lot of attention for the behavior that his team is planning to ignore so that they can reduce and eliminate it. It's just been reinforced unintentionally by someone with the best of intentions who's trying to help. So we always say, just ask the person who's with them, like, do you need help? Is there anything I can do? I know him, I saw him yesterday. Just communicate. Kids do well if they can versus kids do well if they want to. This is a big one. I don't know if any of you have heard of Ross Green. This is from his work. Kids do well if they can versus kids do well if they want to. Doesn't everybody want to do well? Like, that's the big question, right? We have to think about, if they can, they would. So if they're not, then chances are they're not able to. So what do they need? What can we provide them with that's going to give them that level of support so that they can reach success? I mean, I know, and I can't speak for you, but I imagine that you want to come to work every day and you want to do a good job, right? So you need the tools to do that. I think Dr. Thompson organizing the trainings, along with Kerry, has been a great tool for you guys to do your best work. And I hope that this is helpful. It's the same thing with kids. We want them to come and do their best, but if we're not giving them the tools to do it, then we can't expect them to, right? Because we know that they want to. So try to think about, like, what is it? I try to ask myself when I walk into a classroom and I see a student and he's struggling, like, what is it that's interfering with this little guy today that he just can't meet with success? Again, is he not feeling well? Did he not get a good night's sleep? Did he eat breakfast? I have like this mental checklist that I go through. And once I check those boxes, then I go to like, okay, I look at his work. Is this frustrating for him? Is he familiar with it? Does he need more review? Is he able to hold the pencil? Is that, like I have a whole mental checklist before I figure out sometimes what it is that's interfering with the child not meeting success, because kids don't come to school and generally want to fail. They don't want to be ostracized by their classmates as that kid who's always acting out. And sometimes it's just easier for them to throw the pencil than to say at a table of their peers who are doing the work, like, I don't understand this, especially at the middle school level. So keeping all these things in mind, and I know they sound so basic, but they're easy to overlook when you're like frustrated with the kid who just doesn't want to do his work or wants to leave or appears disrespectful. These are the tools the kids need, right? They need to learn to problem solve. We see these kids come into the rooms, right, and they struggle and they shut down. They put their heads down, and if they could just tell us what the problem is, we could help them to solve it, right? We need to not only help them solve their problem now, but we need to give them the skills to problem solve. Because again, they're going to leave us, they're going to leave the high school, and they're going to go in the world, and they're going to need to problem solve. Coping strategies. Kids need to learn to regulate their emotions, right? They're frustrated. They need to have strategies. How can I help myself? Do I need a break? We take for granted that we need a break. We get up and take a break. If you had to get up and go to the bathroom, you would go, right? Are they not able to ask for a break? Are they not able to say that the work is too hard or too easy? What is it that they need that's going to help them to cope and regulate their emotions? And flexibility, right? We have to teach them to be flexible, that things change and it's okay, that we can look at things differently, that we can come at things from different angles. All of these things are ideas when we're looking at a student and thinking, how can we help them access success? When you see a student in crisis, keep in mind, could be mental health, could be something in their invisible backpack, could be related to their disability. Know when to get involved. We talked about this, your volume, the type of directions you're providing. Please make sure that they're clear, they're positive phrases, and they're direct. Kids in crisis can't hear you if you're giving them a whole big litany of what to do next. They can hear bits and pieces. Remember, they're in crisis. This goes back to our conversation about nonverbal communication and proximity, keeping a safe distance, being mindful of your body and its position. Are you positioning yourself in a way that makes a student feel defensive and is going to act out towards you even though it's unintentional? And your voice, your tone, and your volume, the speed at which you're talking at the child, always important. And it's hard. That's really something that's really challenging when a kid is truly in a crisis, is to keep that level of calm. But they are looking at you. This is just quick strategies on how to diffuse behaviors when you see a kid who's in it. You interrupt it, interfere it, stop, bring attention to it. Joey, stop, you're hitting Johnny. Put your hands down and let's walk. Like, interrupt, interfere, bring attention to it, and give them what you want them to do next. This is if-then. You've all heard if-then. You probably use if-then with your children at home. If you eat your pasta, you can have ice cream, right? It's simple, it's basic, we all do it, but it works. If we can get, numbers 1 through 5 done, Then you can have a break. I know this is hard, let's get to it. Simple, clear, within reason, and something that you can enforce, obviously. If you're going to promise a child or a student a break after 5 math problems, make sure that you're able to deliver on that. Questions? Answers, questions, comments? No? Anything you want to share that's happening in your classrooms? No names that you want to talk through with the group? Anything comes to mind? Well, if it does, you can always email me. Come stop by. I'm happy to talk through behavior with you at any time. It's one of my favorite topics. And thank you again. Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming. This is an interesting model.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
It was asked that we address difficult behaviors at the last session when we talked about autism. So I know there are many looking forward to this particular topic. So you're gonna hit a home run with requests to hear about how to handle difficult behaviors. You covered it.
All right. Well, good news. I'm always happy to shut this off. Are we on?
You're still on. And you covered it in the presentation. So thanks again.